tonight, Tuesday night, so we have some questions have been sent in, and we'll do our best to give some answers.
Dear Luang Pa, how are the resident monks doing?
Good question. All the ones sitting here look well. Thank you for the inquiry. We're all doing well so far as I know. In Thailand, when people ask that kind of question from monks, they sometimes answer, "I'm well, but I'm not good." Meaning, I'm well, meaning physically, no particular problems or ailments. The requisites are provided. I have enough food and accommodation and so on. But I'm not good, meaning haven't reached Nibbana yet, so I'm not yet good. So I think we're like that. We're well supported, but we're not yet good because we're still practicing for the end of suffering. But we certainly appreciate all the support we've had through the lockdown. We're still getting food every day because there are dedicated Buddhists bringing up food on our roster every day. So we're still able to go bindabata at the kitchen and get enough food to carry on practicing. We already have our robes, we have our huts in the forest, and we have enough other requisites to survive. So all that's left is the mind. So even though materially we're well supported, we still have to look after our mind, and that's why we're practicing. And that's where we have to put our efforts. So in the course of practice, it's normal that sometimes you have ups and downs, different experiences based on your own karma, your own attachments. But that's the basis for our practice. We have to learn to work through our karma and let go of the causes of suffering and make our mind really good.
Dear Luang Pa, can we become too attached to teachers, meditation, precepts, and so on?
Well, simple answer, yes. We can get attached to everything in life. The root of all our attachment, or the thing we attach to or cling to, is this body and mind, the 5 khandhas, 5 groups of experience: body, feelings, memory, thought formations, and sense consciousness. So as we practice the Dhamma, looking for a way out of suffering, which is coming to realize that attachment is the cause of suffering, and abandoning, letting go of attachment, it's quite normal that part of your experience of developing the path, the Buddha taught us, the Eightfold Noble Path, dana, sila, bhavana, sila, samadhi, panya, that at times attachment even to the very things we're practicing will happen. We attach to teachers, so we might attach to the personality of a teacher. If we find that teacher is very helpful in our practice, inspiring, wise, peaceful, then it's natural we want to be close to them, spend time with them. So most teachers will be on the lookout for that in their students, and they won't be encouraging that if they're really wanting the best. You know, the true love or the true kindness of a teacher is not to teach the student just to cling to the teacher. It's actually to give the student enough tools and wisdom to practice for themselves, even though they still might respect and have gratitude for the teacher. But the idea is not just to cling to the teacher, it's to practice for yourself. But we still have our teachers, and often we will spend time with them, ask questions of them, look to them for guidance, example. But we also have to see that that relationship is one that's a cause for us to go off and develop our own mind, develop our own inner understanding of the practice, not just to cling blindly to the teacher. So the Buddha himself didn't have all his monks and nuns just stay with him. He sent them off. Like the first 60 enlightened monks under the Buddha that he sent off. He said, go in different directions for the good of the population so they can hear the Dhamma in many different places. He didn't want everyone just to gather together in one spot next to him, make him feel good or something. He didn't need that. A good teacher isn't looking for, he's not just gathering people around to make himself feel good or herself feel good. They're there to teach so that you can go off and practice for yourself. Just like parents, really. Parents bring up their children, and a good parent is not just getting the child to cling to the parent indefinitely, giving your children confidence, love, wisdom and tools that they can use in their life so they can become a good human being, not just always be clinging to you as a parent, say. So any part of the practice, whether it's a person, the teacher, or techniques, meditation techniques and systems of meditation, or precepts, rules, they can all become a basis for attachment, especially in the early part of our practice when we're new to it. We're trying to train ourselves, so monks and nuns have this problem as well. You're just learning the monastic discipline, the form, the rules, and you often cling quite tightly because you're learning something new and you don't want to make mistakes, get it wrong, forget. But then because of that clinging, then sometimes it can still be a cause of suffering. So you might cling to your rules and then you see someone else you believe is not conforming or following the rule in the same way or not keeping the rule. So you might look down on them or criticize them. Lay Buddhists can have this problem. Maybe try to keep the 5 precepts every day, put a lot of effort into that, and then there's someone close to them that doesn't keep the 5 precepts, so maybe start to look down on that person because they're clinging too tightly to the sense of self, the conceit that forms around their precepts. Or it could be meditation techniques. Sometimes you see Buddhists arguing, my teacher or my technique is the best, better than yours. I do it this way, your way, no, that's no good. It happens like in any other walk of life. So you have to be on the lookout for that, because it sooner or later will arise in your thinking. We form views, opinions, attach to them, cling to them, and that can lead to suffering in different ways. Conflict with others, doubt is a big problem as well. Or just maybe anger or aversion to something, or misusing them. You have to see the practice. The Eightfold Path is the Buddha compared to a raft that takes us across the ocean of suffering, samsara, to get to nibbana on the other side. So if you're clinging too tightly to your raft, well, what does that mean? Maybe you cling so tightly to your raft, maybe someone else is on their raft going along in the ocean nearby, and you see them and you sort of, this raft is better than that raft. End up having a big argument in the middle of the ocean, and neither party gets to the other side because they're attaching so much to their raft. My raft's bigger than yours, more powerful, made better, whatever. And so they just end up going around in circles in the middle of the ocean, not going anywhere because they're having an argument about whose raft is better. Or what the Buddha said, when you reach the other side, you leave the raft on the shore and you walk off free from suffering. You don't carry the raft on your shoulders and walk around saying, I've got the best raft in the world. You're supposed to have reached Nibbana, but you're still clinging to your raft. One reflection Ajahn Chah used to give for this problem that we sometimes cling too much even to the aspects of the practice, the sense of self forms around our meditation technique or knowledge, our precepts, these kind of things. He used to encourage people to look for the level of practice that is just the right amount, the feeling that is just right. So you're neither too tight, clinging too tight, nor too loose, because too loose is not good either. You don't just say, oh, I shouldn't cling to the precepts, so then you give up following precepts, or I shouldn't cling to my teacher, so you just ignore the teacher, abandon your teacher, or cling to the meditation technique. You've seen that as an attachment, so you give up meditating. That's not right either. So you have to find the balance, the amount that is just right, podi in Thai. And they get this term often from things like eating food. You eat food the right amount for your body on that day, that occasion. Too much and you feel ill, too little and you feel ill. You learn to eat the right amount, just right for your needs. And the practice, that's one guideline. You're in your practice, you're looking for that level which is just right. So you hold to the precepts, but you don't hold so tightly that they cause suffering to you or others. You use your meditation technique, but you don't cling so tightly that it becomes a view and a sense of self that again causes you suffering. So you have to find that level that is just right, and you learn that through experience, by reflecting on what you're doing, understanding what you're doing better, and understanding what is the level where you make use of the teachings, the teacher, the teachings, but not clinging so tightly that you become blinded and end up having conflicts, say.
Dear Tan Ajahn, if skillful and wholesome actions lead to a good rebirth, which is still in samsara, then what actions will lead to the end of karma, that is, to no further rebirth? Thank you.
Well, it's the karma of developing the Eightfold Noble Path, is for developing clear knowledge and vision of the way things are leads to the end of clinging, attachment, end of ignorance, which leads to nibbana, and leads to the end of karma. So there's no way around it. Having been born, we're here because of the fruits of our karma, and now we're here, we are making karma. So much of the Buddha's encouragement was for us to at least start off making good karma. He sometimes talked about karma as dark karma that leads to dark results, bright karma that leads to bright results, karma that is both dark and bright and leads to results that are both dark and bright, and then the karma that leads to the end of karma. So, most people understand the simplest version of this, that to try to make more good karma through body, speech and mind, develop your mind, the intentions, the volitions of your mind into skillful ones, abandon the unskillful ones. So you're making more bright karma, leading to good results. So this is why we practice generosity, keep precepts, practice mindfulness, reflect on the Dhamma. And we try to avoid making dark karma, because that brings us and other people suffering. Most people understand that. Where we're often learning is to see, well, sometimes even when we're trying to make bright karma, good karma, more unskillful intentions slip into what we're doing, and we make mistakes, we can unwittingly hurt ourselves, hurt others, and you learn sometimes from that, and you're seeing, oh yeah, some things I do have a mixture of outcomes, both good and bad. And you can trace it back to maybe your intention is not yet fully pure, or there's not yet full understanding of what you're doing through inexperience or unawareness, and you can learn from that. But our good fortune is we've met the Buddha's teachings, we have faith in the Buddha and in his disciples, enlightened disciples. So the Eightfold Path, which is the karma that leads ultimately to the end of all karma, nibbana, is there. It's available for us. And in the beginning we take it on as a theory. because we haven't practiced enough yet, so we have to test it through our practice. And it's a good theory, and it can save us a lot of time, a lot of wrong turns in life, but still we have to put it into practice to really understand more. Excuse me. So as you develop the path, the Eightfold Noble Path, one of the results, the good karmic results that come out, is you start to gain more understanding of, and particularly in terms of what is suffering, what is its cause, what leads to the end of suffering. And you get more confidence in that understanding, it becomes more profound, your mind becomes clearer, so less and less are you creating the causes for further suffering, and more you're reducing those causes, abandoning them. So what you're abandoning from your mind is the causes of suffering is greed, intentions or karma rooted in greed, anger, delusion. And you're cultivating karma that is rooted in non-greed, non-anger, non-delusion, which ultimately is purifying the mind to the point where you finally remove all delusion by developing clear insight to the nature of phenomena, the way the world is, the way physical, mental, physicality, mentality, or body and mind is, to see that the three characteristics of existence are these are the features of our experience in the world, whether it's the physical world, mental world, they're characterized by impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and lack of self. This knowledge and insight, when developed to its completion, leads the mind to let go of that doer, the one who makes karma, the sense of I, myself, mine. Insight into the three characteristics is helping to erode away all attachment, all clinging to the sense of self, even in the good we do, even in the good karma, the good intentions we have, the results of the good karma we have, the happiness, the sense of well-being, the peace of mind. So even states of peace that come through meditation, even the bliss, the piti and sukha and so on, one is gradually seeing these are still formations, sankharas, they're still unsatisfactory, not to be clung to with a sense of self. So little by little, developing this path, we're chipping away at this sense of self to the point where hopefully one sees it and experiences it's gone, it's finished. There's no one there. One sees that clearly, and then if there's no one there, then you're not making any more karma. The mind has no more causes to make karma. So one who reaches Nibbana is not born again. Nibbana is the unborn, the uncreated. There's no one left, no sense of self left to do that. So the arahant no longer is making karma for future birth. They're still receiving the fruits of their old karma, up to the end of their life. They have a body, and they still have to experience pleasure and pain, the pleasant and unpleasant experiences of the world. But after they die, that's it. No more karma to be reborn again. So they've completed the Eightfold Path. No more birth. No more birth, no more aging, sickness and death. No more coronavirus. No more any kind of suffering you can think of, all finished, because they've gone beyond the karmic process. That's what we're aspiring to. So we're still making karma as long as we're on the path, but it's the karma that is leading to the end of karma.
Dear Ajahn, what benefits do monks get from living in the forest?
That's a good question to remind ourselves why we live out here in the forest. The benefits are more spiritual than materials, say. And that's one reason why Buddhist monks do live out in quiet places, in the forest, in the countryside. And it tends to simplify your life, reduces distractions and reduces the pull of the world. Living in the city, surrounded by people and buildings, material things, you can see there's a lot of temptation for the mind towards distraction, activity, getting involved with things. And it's not necessarily wrong or bad, but when you come to live in the forest, you quite quickly see the mind settling down because there's not a lot of extra impingement, and you still experience heat and cold, you see things, you hear things, but the amount of impingement is reduced, sense impingement is reduced. And that's quite supportive for the practice of meditation, developing mindfulness and then insight to see this process, how suffering arises, how craving leads to clinging, leads to suffering of different sorts. So the simplicity, the seclusion, the peace is very helpful. And so since the time of the Buddha, many monks have chosen to live in the forest. And because it's quiet, you get a lot of mental energy freed from other activities to put into your practice. And you can learn a lot from living in the forest. And you're still a human being living in the world, you're just living in a quiet part of the world. But you can learn from your experience, and monks do. You get uplifted sometimes, the peace of the forest, the beauty of nature, the beauty of seclusion, trees and so on. They have a very uplifting effect on the mind usually, and that's why often people who live in towns and cities go out to the forest, to the countryside, at least to get that experience temporarily. You see life, the cycle of birth and death all the time. You live in the forest, there's creatures, small creatures, large creatures, they're being born, getting older, going through the sufferings of creatures, looking for food, dealing with disease, dealing with weather, getting old, getting sick, and then dying. And they eat each other, so you're seeing that. Every day you're actually witnessing all kinds of slaughter in the forest, because beautiful little birds are slaughtering worms and insects. We like the birds and the sound of their bird song, but actually most of them are just mass murderers. So you're seeing that every day. You're seeing the fear that animals live with in the forest because they have a lot of predators. You're seeing the hardship of them. So when you're witnessing that, it's teaching you about life, the fact that life is a cycle of birth, aging, sickness and death, whether it's us or animals. You see the value of the wholesome qualities of mind, say compassion, kindness, mindfulness. You see the ugliness of greed and anger, the sort of dog-eat-dog world that the animal kingdom really reflects, shows us. And human beings have it as well, but often it's not so obvious. But when you're seeing animals in their natural environment, that's what they're doing. They're just fighting survival of the fittest. So when, as a monk, you live in the forest, you get a lot of opportunity to learn about life, learn about yourself. You get time, energy is freed up. And when you live as a community, as monks in the forest, you learn a lot from that, supporting each other as a community in the forest, in this quiet environment. And generally speaking, it's a good place to learn the Dhamma and practice what the Buddha taught. Doesn't mean to say you can't practice in the city, of course. You can practice in any situation, and we have to learn to do that. And of course, monks sometimes live in urban areas. Ajahn Chah used to talk a lot about one teacher, Tan Ajahn Kalyano, who died in the 1960s, so a long time ago now, but he's known sometimes in Thai Buddhism as the Arahant in the city, because he lived in a big city monastery, Wat Tapsirin in Bangkok, but he is considered to be an enlightened monk, reached Nibbana, living in the city. And he lived in a hut in the middle of this large monastery in the city, so it's busy, there's many monks there, many ceremonies and functions going on, funerals, blessings, people coming and going every day. But he was very determined to practice the Dhamma for full realization, for Nibbana. So every day he did meditation, sitting and walking meditation. He slept in a coffin, that was his bed, to remind him of the impermanence of life. He didn't go out doing a lot of social work or teaching outside the monastery, but he would teach inside the monastery. But he's put a lot of effort into his own practice, and he was very disciplined, not distracted by the things going on around him. So they say he used to do his walking meditation after midnight, because in the daytime the monastery was so busy, it's not so suitable to do walking meditation. And one of the benefits of the forest is you can do sitting and walking meditation very easily. There's not any distractions. But in the city temples, it's not so easy. So he used to wait till midnight and then start doing his walking meditation. And he's famous for never missing one of the morning or evening pujas, which they have in the monastery. So every morning he would be there for the morning meditation, chanting, every evening for the evening meditation and chanting. He was never lazy, never distracted. He was always there. The only time he missed one meeting was the day he died. He was too ill to walk from his kuti to the meditation hall. And all the monks knew, they knew he was ill anyway, but they knew, there's something really up. He hasn't made it today. And they went to his hut and he had died. So he was held up by Ajahn Chah as somebody who became enlightened in the city. And I didn't meet him because I ordained after he had died, but he had one student, one disciple, Lumpur Maha Ampan, who lived in the same monastery, practiced under his guidance, and we believe also became a noble one. So it wasn't just a one-off, there were other monks who lived in the city, cultivated the path and became noble ones. So that's quite an inspiring thing, because the way the world is going, there's more and more urban areas, less forest. So you just have to make the best of what you can. If you're in an urban area, a city or a town, well, practice there. If you get to the forest, good. But more and more the forest is disappearing, so we have to be able to adapt our practice as well. The joke in Thailand is you go and live in the forest. Someone like Ajahn Chah was living in Wat Bapong forest. It's very peaceful. In the early days still had wild animals, had malaria. It was an unpleasant place to live, very humid, stuffy kind of climate. So he lived there for many years, but as he became more well-known, more people had faith in him. More and more people came to the monastery to visit, more monks, more nuns. And also the villagers started to build houses right next to the forest. So it became less and less secluded, and gradually a whole village grew up around the monastery, outside the monastery, and they had to build a wall. And forest monasteries sometimes are like that. They start off as very secluded, quiet places, but over time, because of the power of the Dhamma and the good practice going on, it attracts people and they become less and less secluded. So you do have to learn how to deal with that in your practice.
Dear Lumpur, I run a cafe, and it is a requirement by the authorities to carry out pest control. I do it almost every month. I feel very uneasy each time the service is carried out, as this will cause me to break the first precept. What is your advice on this?
Well, it sounds like you're sensitive to the issue. Sometimes you just have to follow your heart. So we do try to keep the first precept and practice non-violence and not harming or destroying living creatures, even small ones. That's our aim, that's our goal. And it's quite common that people in the course of their life, they have a job where maybe that is compromised somewhat. which is a difficulty. So maybe the first step is to make your goal that I want to be able to keep the 5 precepts purely. That's my goal, long-term goal. But then the practical reality at the moment, wherever you are in your job, your income, and especially at this time when many people have lost their job, lost their income, it's understandable if you feel you can't give up your job yet, you can't change it because you need that income for yourself or family. So you do the best you can in the situation. So karma is partly the kind of karma we make, and the results are partly determined by the quality of the intention and the strength of the intention. So you can still develop the intention not to harm, not to kill, not to harm creatures. But you also don't want to just fool yourself or turn a blind eye. If you're having to do this because it's a government requirement, and it is, you have to accept that karma, don't you? Say, well, I don't really want to kill, that's not my intention, but if it has to be done to fulfill the regulations, otherwise they'll close me down, I'll just do what the regulations require, whatever the government requires, I'll do for the moment. And if that does lead to the death of pests, creatures, I will ask their forgiveness and share the merits with them and accept I'm making this bad karma, and I'll look for ways to reduce it and ultimately end it. And that may take some time, but that would be your goal perhaps. And you see what you can do about it. So like in the monastery, we've just been talking about the forest. You live in the forest, you live very close to the nature, animals, so you do get some interaction with what the world thinks of as pests. But the way monks deal with it, you aim more for prevention. We can't kill, we don't want to kill, so you try a lot, put a lot of effort into prevention. So like Ajahn Chah used to say, keep things clean and tidy the best you can, because that will decrease the amount of pests you have to deal with. So we have a kitchen here, and that's, they're still exposed to pests, but we find if you mop the floor, wipe the surfaces, store things properly, the amount of pests are minimal. And we're lucky, perhaps one advantage of a colder climate in the mountains, we don't get cockroaches very much. Occasionally you get the 1 or 2, and you find one, you can just pick it up in some kind of container and expel it from the monastery without killing it, and that we don't get infested by them. Rats will tend to come when we're careless, so if you leave rubbish around too long, well, rats will come, they're attracted by it. But if you clean your rubbish up daily and you clean your place, then the rats tend to not infest your place as well. So we've not had much problem with pests here, that we get them, but they don't become established. We just keep cleaning, keep tidying up. We can catch if there's a stubborn rat keeps returning, we've got a trap that will catch the rat without killing it, and then we go and release it elsewhere in the forest. Our huts in the forest are subject to ants and termites, so we try to do things like my hut has oily rags around the stumps of the hut so that termites are discouraged from going up the stumps and eating the wood of the frame. So you learn ways to just keep your place clean, tidy, protected, to reduce the problem or prevent the problem from ever arising. And it's never perfect. You might still get 1 or 2 pests, as they are called, around, but you can often just endure them or pick them up and remove them or do something without killing, and you do the best you can. So try your best to reduce or prevent pests from coming, so then there's less chance of you having to kill them or employ someone else to kill them. Sometimes we get possums. We had one possum, very smart possum. He pulled off the tile of our bhikkhu vihara on the roof and went in and made a nest, and we knew he was there because we could hear him snoring every day. He was sleeping inside in the daytime, and then he'd come out at night. So Some of the monks had to go up on the roof and do a lot of repair work to make sure he couldn't get back in, and he's got plenty of trees to sleep in, so the possum went off to live in the trees. We didn't have to kill him. But he comes round every autumn when the apples are ripe, because we've got an apple tree. And one year we were tidying out our garden shed, and we found him sleeping in a bucket. In the day he slept in the bucket, at night he would just go up the apple tree and sit in the apple tree all night eating the apples. We didn't kill him. The monks tidying up the shed simply tipped the bucket out, and he kind of yawned and he went off and he climbed in another bucket. So the monks thought, okay, we'll leave him there. He wasn't too much trouble. So if you have a heart of metta, that helps, and you try your best not to deliberately harm creatures. But if it's an ongoing problem and you're unhappy about it, or your heart is telling you, maybe you have to see what you can do about one day when you're ready, leave that job, leave that way of life, or do something else where you don't get involved with having to kill pests.
This is the last question this evening. Dear Luang Pa, what is the difference between the 5 aggregates and nama rupa? With thanks and metta.
Another technical question. Well, you hear monks or you read the Dhamma, the suttas, you'll hear a lot about the 5 khandhas, which are these groups of experience that the Buddha divided a human being up into. So we have the body, the physical body, feelings, memory, perception, thought formations, and then sense consciousness. These 5 groups of experience. And it's amazing the depth of the Buddha's wisdom and his way of giving us a fairly straightforward way of describing human experience and then looking at it. And the main thing is, he said, well, these 5 khandhas or groups of experience are a basis for clinging. So we call them the upadana khandha. And as we've been talking earlier today, clinging is the cause for suffering. It's the cause for rebirth, cause for suffering. So a lot of our effort in the practice is developing mindfulness and developing wisdom and understanding, looking back at our own set of khandhas and observing the 3 characteristics of experience in these khandhas: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, lack of self. And one way they describe the kinds of insights that come up is that one is seeing the khandhas, how they are conditioned things, and what we call a self, a person, is really a process of interaction of different component parts, the physical part, the body, and then the mental part, and the interaction, but the conditioned nature of it. One thing is conditioning another, arising in dependence on another. And there's nothing in any of these 5 khandhas that you can pinpoint and say, that is a me, that's myself. It's not that there's nothing there, but there's no lasting self in any of these 5 khandhas. That's a very common way we describe the Dhamma and the way of practice developing insight into our experience. Physical phenomena, mental phenomena, internal, external, so ourselves, other people are the same. Whatever aspect one is focusing in this way to recognize, see these 3 characteristics of existence. Sometimes you'll hear teachers talk about nama rupa, and in a general way it's the same thing. Rupa means physical form, nama means mentality, so the mind and the contents and the activities of the mind. So sometimes they're used interchangeably, but specifically I think if you read the suttas, the way the Buddha talked, nama rupa is often brought up as one of the causal links in this process of paticca samuppada, the process of dependent arising, where the Buddha is describing how suffering arises through a chain of causal conditions. So there's avijja as a cause for sankhara, karmic formations. Karmic formations give rise to consciousness, vijnana. Vijnana gives rise to nama rupa. And so, in terms of the 5 khandhas, there's a split there. There's vijnana, which is considered consciousness arising due to previous karmic formations. So we've made karma, and this is constantly a cause for consciousness to arise. Consciousness is a conditioned thing from moment to moment. And with consciousness, nama rupa is the other aspects of the khandhas mainly. It's rupa, again, body, and then nama, perception, feeling, and the sankhara khandha, thought formations. And particularly when you talk about paticca-samuppada, they talk about attention, feeling, perception, attention, manasikara, as one of the nama khandhas. But you might say the mental factors that arise with the mind. So it gets quite technical, but it's worth reading about to see how the Buddha is describing the process by which suffering arises. With nama rupa as a cause, salayatana arise. Salayatana are 6 sense doors or sense faculties. We can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and then there's the mind, and then there are objects. So when there's an eye and there's light, you get seeing arise, and you get contact. So with the 6 sense doors, you get contact, you get sense contact, 6 kinds of sense contact. With each sense contact, you get feeling. So you get pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling. And dependent on feeling, if you're not mindful, there's no insight. Craving is conditioned. So craving arises. You like pleasant feeling, you dislike unpleasant feeling, and so on. So, sometimes the Buddha was analysing and getting quite technical, splitting things up to help you to contemplate and look at these things. So nama rupa is slightly different in this perspective from the 5 khandhas, but in practice often much the same thing in terms of how you're developing mindfulness and investigating your experience. You're looking at the same things. This teaching on the paticca-samuppada, Ajahn Chah used to say, it's on paper we can put it out, and it's a very impressive map and sort of structural explanation of the way suffering arises, and then the way to abandon suffering by breaking these links in the causal chain that leads up to suffering, breaking them by employing mindfulness and insight. You put it out on paper, it's quite detailed, there's a lot to learn, and the practitioner is sitting there thinking, oh, is this vijnana, is this nama rupa, is this phassa? In one moment it's quite hard to get all those 12 links of the chain there and be analysing them and seeing them. Doesn't mean to say they're useless, but one has to see the difference between what we call the external pariyatti, the external study of the Dhamma, and then internally what we're actually doing with it in our practice. And to develop mindfulness, we have to keep developing that continuity of mindfulness and sharpness so that we can see nama rupa, or see these 5 khandhas and see them in light of the 3 characteristics. That's what we're developing on the inside, the internal practice. Because the actual experience, say it's like, how does suffering arise? Well, you see something, so you see, that's consciousness, maybe that's based on previous karma, so you see someone walking towards you and you see them and you recognize them as that guy, I don't like him, he's my enemy. So you see your enemy coming, so there's consciousness, that's previous karma, consciousness arises. Nama rupa is immediately kind of affected by that, isn't it? If you have the consciousness of seeing somebody and then you have the perception you don't like them, then that may affect how you feel. You feel tense, your facial expression, nama rupa is affected by that particular experience. And if you're seeing somebody, the consciousness, nama rupa, salayatana, all your senses are there, maybe you're seeing them, so everything comes down to just seeing. All the other senses go quiet for a while. You're just transfixed on seeing this person that you don't like and you want to say something to them perhaps. You're seeing the paticca samuppada in practice, but it's often that's in just a few seconds or a few moments of experience. So you have to remember that as you're studying on the outside, the theory, but also you have to look back on the inside, and it's quick. So maybe all you have enough time to do is be mindful of the sense contact and the feeling arising, and not let it spill out into unwholesome, unskillful behavior or speech, or even just dwelling on negative thoughts. If one can employ mindfulness at that moment, well, maybe the whole thing goes quiet. One doesn't become angry seeing that person. One just sees and then lets go. But if one is not very mindful, well, maybe some anger, ill will arise, and one has to work harder to let go of it. So Ajahn Chah said, well, contemplate this and you'll see the process is very fast. He said it's like climbing to the top of the tree, the apple tree, say, not finding the possum there, but just getting to the top, and then you slip and you fall, and all you know is that you hit the ground with a thud. You don't have time to count the number of twigs and branches and leaves that you passed on the way down. You just go from the top to the bottom in a second, and it hurts. It hurts. He said, really, this paticca samuppada is a bit like that. We can place out all the 12 links of the chain. This leads to that. This is a cause for that to arise, and it's correct. But as an experience, it's very fast. You may not have time to count every branch that you pass. You just know, see, and then a feeling, liking, disliking, and a pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling. So this is where we have a lot of work to do in our practice, developing mindfulness and steadiness of mind so that we can contemplate, to see how suffering arises, how to abandon suffering, bring up the mindfulness and the insight to abandon it. So, quite a profound area to study, both from the suttas and from the commentaries, but also from our own experience. More than I can talk about tonight, but I'll just leave it there, and there's more that we can practice and contemplate in the future, I'm sure. So hopefully something we've said has been useful, but we'll wish you all well, and may the blessings of the Triple Gem guide you and protect you. Andmayam Dhamma Kataya Sadhu Karang Dadamase